She sent her husband to the store, her kids were dead within the hour, and the prosecution just rested their entire case on that one errand, after nearly 70 witnesses, after months of testimony, after forensic analysts, medical experts, neighbors, nurses, and a husband who had to sit in that courtroom and relive the worst night of his life. The government said, "We're done. We've said what we needed to say." And now comes the part that could actually decide this thing. But before we get there, before we talk about what the defense is about to do, we need to talk about the last thing the prosecution left the jury with. Because they didn't end with a dramatic speech or a tearful witness. They ended with a man named Ian Whiffen and a phone and a watch. And what those two devices recorded on January 24th, 2023 is either the most damning evidence in this entire trial or the most tragically misunderstood data point anyone has ever tried to use to prove premeditation. Let's slow this down. Ian Whiffen is a digital forensic specialist. He works with a company called Celebrite, the firm that law enforcement calls when they need to crack open a phone and pull out everything. And what Whiffen told the jury is this: Lindsay Clancy's iPhone was unlocked for the last time that day, January 24th, 2023, at approximately 5:13 p.m. 5:13. At that moment, according to the data, she performed two actions. And she sent a text message to her husband Patrick telling him which product to buy. That's it. That's the last digital footprint she left before everything fell apart. Now stop for a second. Think about what the prosecution wants the jury to do with that information. They want the jury to look at that timestamp, 5:13 p.m., and see calculation, coherent enough to compose a text message, deliberate enough to send her husband out of the house. They want the jury to connect those dots and arrive at one conclusion: she planned this. She got Patrick out of the way, and then she acted. That is the prosecution's closing argument in miniature, right there, in one unlock on one phone. But here's where it gets complicated, and I mean genuinely uncomfortably complicated, because the defense has been sitting quietly through 70 witnesses, and they have a very different story to tell about that same 5:13 moment. They're not disputing the data. The phone data is the phone data. They can't argue with Celebrite. What they're going to argue is the meaning of that data. What does it actually tell you about the state of someone's mind? And that question, that single question, is going to dominate the next phase of this trial. Now, here's something worth pointing out, because I think it gets lost in the coverage sometimes. The defense in this case is not arguing that Lindsay Clancy didn't do it. They're not saying it was someone else. They're not presenting an alibi. What they are arguing is that Lindsay Clancy was not criminally responsible for what she did because she was not in control of her own mind when it happened. That is a completely different legal argument, and it is a much harder one to win. In Massachusetts, to succeed with a mental illness defense, you essentially have to convince the jury of one of two things: either that the defendant didn't understand what she was doing, or that she didn't understand that what she was doing was wrong. Not wrong in a vague moral sense, wrong in a legal sense. And here's the irony that the prosecution is going to hammer over and over again. She unlocked her phone at 5:13 p.m. and she coordinated her husband's departure. How does someone who doesn't understand what they're doing manage to send Patrick to the store first? That's the prosecution's argument. And you have to admit, it's not a stupid one. But the defense is going to come back at that with something that honestly might shake some of you. Severe postpartum psychosis doesn't necessarily make a person unable to function in basic routine ways. And at the same time, you can be experiencing a complete break from reality so profound that the things you believe are true bear no relationship to actual facts. People in the grip of serious psychotic episodes have done extraordinarily complex things while simultaneously being completely detached from consensual reality. So when the prosecution holds up that 5:13 unlock and says, "See, she was calculating," the defense is going to say that proves nothing, that a functioning send button does not prove a functioning mind. And that, right there, is the battlefield this trial is moving on to. The defense is expected to lean heavily on psychiatric and medical expert testimony. They need to put people on the stand who can explain what postpartum psychosis looks like at its most severe, what it does to perception, what it does to judgment, what it does to a person's understanding of right and wrong. And they need those experts to connect that clinical picture directly to Lindsay Clancy, to her specific treatment, her specific prescriptions. The question of whether the medication she was prescribed made her condition catastrophically worse. If Lindsay Clancy was a woman who sought help, who took the medication she was given, and whose mental health deteriorated in ways that nobody caught in time, then the story is not about a woman who planned to hurt her children. The story becomes about a system that failed her. And the question becomes, do we punish the person the system failed? Now, the prosecution is going to push back hard. They are going to cross-examine those psychiatrists, and they are going to keep coming back to that phone, 5:13 p.m. Because in the prosecution's version, those actions are not the twitching of a broken mind. They are the fingerprints of intent, which brings me to something I want you to sit with for a second. What do we actually believe about mental illness? When it's abstract, most people are fairly compassionate about the idea of mental illness affecting behavior. But then you put 3 children in a courtroom in the form of photographs, in the form of a father's testimony, and you ask 12 regular people to weigh that grief against a diagnosis. And suddenly it gets a lot harder to be abstract about it. That's just honesty about human psychology. The defense knows this. They have to make those 12 people look at her and see a patient, not a predator. So, where does this leave us right now on August 17th, 2026? The prosecution rested 70 witnesses, a digital forensic expert as their final witness. And now Lindsay Clancy's legal team stands up and they begin the most important phase of this entire trial. They have one argument, one path to any outcome other than a murder conviction. Whether the jury buys that, whether 12 people can arrive at not guilty by reason of mental illness, that is what this trial is really about now. The prosecution made their case. Now we wait to see if the defense can do something much harder. Not just prove she was sick, but prove that being sick was the whole story. Stay with me on this one, because the expert witnesses are coming, and when they do, this case is going to get much more complicated. If you want to understand every development as it happens, hit subscribe and turn on notifications. Don't miss what comes next.